This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 116 of the Dressage Radio Show, brought to you by Equestrian Collections, Horseshow.com, and Charles Owen. Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, back with you for another very full episode of the Dressage Radio Show, which this week focuses exclusively on paradressage. And my guests are Courtney Dye, who has set herself a new goal to become a paradressage competitor, Britain's Jane Goldsmith, who is a 5-star paradressage judge and coach, and also was a previous coach to Lee Pearson. Our first guest here on the show this week, Lee Pearson, of course, is a multi-Olympic gold medalist for Great Britain, and he's going to kick us off on this week's show. But before we get to Lee, a lot of people ask me about how they can listen to the show. Some people go directly to the website, but I did want to remind you that you can listen on iTunes, and a lot of people do that by downloading the free podcast each week. All you have to do is hook up your MP3 player, your iPhone, your iPod, BlackBerry, whatever it may be. Just hook it up to iTunes, subscribe to Dressage Radio. It's easy to search for that on iTunes, and that way you get the latest episode every week, and you can listen to it on the go. That's the way I listen to it. And of course, if you have an iPhone, you can download the Hallway Feeds app, which carries all the Horse Radio Network shows. But I don't want to waste any more time here on the show because it is a very, very full show, and I want to kick off with our first guest. But let me just remind you of Lee Pearson's accomplishments. He is a multi-gold medalist, as I said. He's won all the gold medals that he could collect at 3 Olympic Games, starting in Sydney in 2000 and on to Athens 2004 and in Beijing in 2008. In 2005, he was awarded the OBE in the New Year's Honours List, and in 2009, he was then awarded the CBE. He's been inducted into the British Horse Society Hall of Fame. He has won Sports Personalities Awards. The list goes on and on. So no better person to tell us what it takes to get there and to stay at the top of this sport. Lee, welcome to the Dressage Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, guys.
Well, it's nice to have you on at last. But first thing we have to ask you is how you are after your fall.
I'm fine. I went to the accident emergency unit, and they straight away that evening of having the accident, and they said I hadn't broken anything and sent me home with painkillers. So I actually got on with normal life for 3 weeks and tried to ride on the second week after. I just thought I was bruised and battered, and it was finding it a struggle. And I just had a new Grand Prix horse arrive, so I really wanted to ride. And it was just so painful. I managed 3 days and got less and less and less in time in the saddle each day. And then I asked the management for an MRI scan and was told I broke my back in 4 places.
Oh,
Crushed 3 vertebrae and cracked 3 vertebrae and crushed a 4th. But I spent 3 weeks kind of driving around the country doing clinics and doing all normal stuff really other than riding. So I've had 8 weeks off now since the MRI scan, and had another scan a few days ago and waiting for the results of that. But I'll be back in the saddle and hopefully be competing soon.
Gosh, well, that's obviously a hindrance and sounds very painful to break so much, but you're probably used to that. You've probably got a pretty tolerant pain level, haven't you?
I think I have one with broken bones. Don't pull my hairs on my legs because then I really will fall out. But as far as breaking bones go, then yeah, that kind of comes with the territory a little bit.
It does. Well, tell us about the new horse you have.
I've got a few horses in the pipeline for London, but I do have a new 4-year-old mare who won't be ready for London. She's called the Lady Joseph Charitable Trust bought the mare for me, and she's called Silhouette, and she's black. She's beautiful. She's a lovely, lovely person and really calm in the stable. And when you get on her, she's like a Ferrari to ride. With one of my grooms, we just took her to her first young horse class, and she won that out 28 in the class of top riders on their top 4-year-olds, and she won that class. So she's really phenomenal. I still have Blue Circle Boy in the field, my old retired boy that I competed in Athens, the big Golden Dun horse. Mm-hmm. We still have Gentleman. He's currently my top horse. And then we've just had another horse, a stallion imported from Denmark, of which I can't give too much away, but he might be my secret weapon for London. But I'm not giving anything away about him just yet. But it will be very, he's very unusual, and it'll be very Lee when people see him.
Okay, so how many horses do you have altogether? I've counted 4. Is that the stable?
No, I have about 8 horses altogether. I have a brood mare that produces a fabulous offspring, and we have a great foal from her each year. So I've got a 2-year-old black, beautiful mare from her. The brood mare's by Metal, and the 2-year-old filly that I'm keeping at the moment is by Sandro Dancer, which is a British graded stallion by Sandro Hitt. I have her last-year-old son by a stallion that I own called Bacardi, who's by Breitling. What else do I have? She's due to foal on Thursday, actually, for this year's foal, also by Bacardi. I have, obviously, Blue Circle Boy, Gentleman. I have Zeon, who was my second-in-command horse, who I had the accident on, but irony is he's my best-behaved horse in the yard, but he just couldn't cope with restricted exercise very well. Silhouette. I think that's about it. I apologise if I've left anybody out.
Yeah. Well, I'm bound to ask you, where do you find these horses, Lee?
All over the place, because obviously as you get to higher standing when you've been successful, people presume that you've paid a lot of money for them, and yeah, it does get more expensive to find a quality horse, because that's what everybody wants. But like Blue Circle Boy, I took him all the way to Grand Prix, trained him to Grand Prix. People can see that on YouTube, the video. And I won at Prix St. George with him. I found him 4 miles from my house in a field as a naughty stallion with a very small owner that he used to walk all over. So he certainly wasn't an expensive buy. And then Gentleman, I have a contact in Germany called Christian Heinrich. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know of Christian. And Gentleman's come via him. Zeon was bought from one of my grooms. And then the other girls we've bred by the one from the Lady Joseph Charitable Trust. That's a charity that's been set up earlier this year from a lady that sadly passed away, and her niece wanted to put the money towards a charity and a trust and loved dressage and wanted to support the British para riders. So this fund has been set up to support the best riders in the country to hopefully maintain that gold medal, that team gold medal that we like.
Yes, you do like that, don't you? You've got a taste for that. Then nothing is better than gold. And now, tell us a little bit about how anyone would get in the UK get involved with para dressage, because we're going to hear later on in the show, Lee, from Courtney King Dye over here in the States, who's actually focusing her goals and ambitions now towards the sport of para dressage here in the States. But how do you get started in the UK? What is the structure there for? I mean, how did you come up personally through the ranks and become the star that you are of the sport?
Yeah, I'll let you know the different structures. Obviously, we've got a great Riding for the Disabled Association here now. They are very therapy orientated, but they also have their competition structures of regionals and national competitions. So some riders come via that. We also have a scheme under British Dressage where riders can apply to get onto their scheme. That's called a foundation squad. And then we also have the world-class performance squads, which are funded by the lottery. And we have a start and potential squad. And then we have the podium squad, which is the elite squad. We have a great competition structure. We have spring, winter and summer championship series. So there's qualifiers for all of those, and then with championship classes, all 3 of those. So in England, it's a really competitive sport, and to be on the podium, you've got to have a lot of talent, a great support group, and great horses. I'm not saying it's all to do with finance, because we have the likes of Anne Dunham, and she's on an old native pony, but he has really good paces and a really good mind, and he comes up with the goods in the arena. But then we have the likes of Sophie Wells, who competes on the young rider. He's just gone to the Europeans representing Great Britain on the young rider squad. So to be on the British team, you really have to have it all. It's really competitive in Great Britain, which is great, really, because not only it's like a pyramid. You need grassroots level riders coming up, because I will retire at some stage, and so will the other podium riders that we have, and you need to have a structure behind that. But it's really interesting to look at other countries around the world now getting more behind their Paralympic riders and coming up with structures that not only support their existing riders, but is out there talent spotting for future riders.
Well, just remind us how old you are now, Lee, and how long you've been in the sport.
Oh, well, I'm very old. I'm 37 now, and I've been within para equestrian since 1998. So that's about 13 years. But I've ridden all my life, so I didn't come really through any structures. I was doing many disciplines with able-bodied riders whilst having a day job behind an office desk, and I went to be assessed as thinking that I wasn't very disabled, and I walked out of the assessment being told I was extremely disabled, and the Great Britain team had medals in their eyes as opposed to pound signs, I think.
Now, what do you attribute to the success in the sport too in the UK? Because it really obviously has blossomed enormously in recent years.
I think a great RDA system originally, but then I think really the world-class funding has certainly helped. And also I think just Paralympians in England are becoming stars now in all different sports. And once you can get on television and on radio, I mean, I've just finished filming a 3-month fly-on-the-wall documentary with Channel 4, then it's easier to get sponsorship, and then it's easier to pay the bills. So in England, it is seen as a top sport, and people appreciate and recognise how successful we've been, and understand that actually to stay at the top's more difficult than getting there. So we work really, really hard, but we all have just great structures, and there's fluidity within that. My structure might not be, for example, what maybe Sophie Christensen would want or need. So we have adaptable structures and support systems that match what the athlete requires.
So obviously it's a very focused, as you say, system and a very successful one. Clearly, now with the Olympics in mind, just hardly a year away now, Lee, and you're coming back from an injury. Can you give us a sense of what your preparation would be? And personal fitness, and also what it involves over the next year? Because you said you've got a secret weapon there. You're not going to tell us about this time. We'll get you back in a year's time, and you can tell us about him. But
you can get it back just before London.
Okay.
I'm doing lots of swimming at the moment to try and stay fit, and that's really, really helping. And what I'm going to slowly get back in the saddle, but actually, I stay quite riding fit, to be honest. I'm quite lucky, so I'll take it easy for a week, and then really, even before I had the accident, I only ride 2 or 3 horses a day, because what actually happens by the end of the week, I'm actually too exhausted, so I limit myself to 2 or 3 horses a day, and I'll be perhaps seeing what I've got in the yard, maybe advertising to see if there's any better horses out there. The trouble is, when I advertise for a horse, I get lots of people offering their horses, and it's very difficult to say to people, you need a very, very high standard of horse or para with very, very good natural basic paces, and that's actually quite hard to find, because it's like a novice type horse, but with the experience to go into an international arena. So I might do a plea to see if there's any better horses in the country than I've already got. And if that's the case and I end up with a lot of horses, I'll compete them nationally, compete a few internationally over the next 11 months, and then really narrow it down by the end of spring next year to hopefully just have 2 that I'm going to be putting head to head to compete alongside each other to get the one that we think the judges prefer and like. But the secret weapon I'm quite excited about.
Now, when you say you've got 2 horses to choose from, or you hope to have, Lee, when it comes down to making that selection between those 2, is that a team effort? Is it between the selectors and the response you've had from the judges in the preparation at that point, or is there? Does it come down to personal choice that you would rather ride one than the other?
It's all of those things. At the end of the day, I want to be riding the one that gets the highest score. But at the same time, if, let's say, the second in command gives me an easier ride and is mentally easier and maybe a bit more secure, then possibly, yeah, we might take that. We may take that horse. But it is a decision that we all make along with the selectors. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I don't get any beneficial treatment, but they understand that I know what I'm talking about. And for example, I might go to squad training every month where they see the horses, and one of my horses loves it at squad training, but maybe doesn't go as well in the arena. So they trust that I give them honest feedback on a daily basis and on a competition basis when they're not there. So it is a little bit complex, but it is a decision that really we make alongside the scores that the horse is gaining, what the selectors know and have seen, and what I'm feeling.
So obviously, the gold medal is the main goal for London. What a wonderful, climax to a fantastic career that would be. Did you say you are considering retiring at some point? I mean, why would you retire from this sport, Lee?
What I've actually said is, going back to the medals, I'm actually aiming, if I repeat what I've done on the past 3 Paralympic Games, I'll be aiming for 12 gold medals at 2012. So the media in England have picked up on that, and they love that little buzzword word. Will Lee get 12 at 12? And what I've said as far as retiring is, I haven't actually said I'm going to retire. What I've said is I've got no life goals really after London. And that's really to kind of take the pressure off myself a little bit, that London is my whole focus. I'm not thinking about after London, whether I will retire, whether I'll carry on. Like any sport and in the team, there's politics, and sometimes that's wind you up. And sometimes I think all I want to do is ride my horses and not get involved in politics. But unfortunately, you have to when you're at the top of your sport. I'm just probably about 90% through trying to move house at the moment. We're having a property valued at the moment from the mortgage lenders. That's really exciting for me. It's actually probably one of the biggest things that I've done in my life. And the property is gorgeous, and we're going to have the horses and the dogs there and everything. So I don't know if I can afford to retire after we've bought this property. But mainly it's politics. I love the horses. Even if I did retire from competition at some point, I love teaching as well. As we all know, not every rider or athlete makes a great teacher, but I'm a people person and I'm a horse person. And I think once you've acquired all the knowledge to train horses up to, let's say, Grand Prix or whatever level, then it's using your psychology skills to get that information over to certain horses and riders. So I love teaching. I do a lot of teaching around the world as well as around the country. So I think when I retire, it probably won't be after London. I will do more travelling and do more teaching and try and help more people.
Well, it sounds as if you're going to keep extremely busy, Lee, and not least of all in the lead up to the game. So we want to wish you the very best of luck. Obviously, recovering. I hope the recovery continues to go the way it should, and you're back in the tack soon. Well,
I said to people, if I have to walk around that arena on my crutches in London with 4 legs, I will be at London. So breaking my back won't stop me. I'll be there.
Good for you, Lee. Well, the best of luck, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Well, what a truly inspirational person and an example of how to overcome adversity. And in a moment, we're going to hear another perspective on the sport from 5-star para-dressage judge Jane Goldsmith. But before we hear from Jane, I want to remind you of one of our sponsors here on the Dressage Radio Show, Equestrian Collections. Because if you're shopping for a young rider, then Equestrian Collections gives you the very best choice of riding apparel, footwear, gifts, helmets and safety gear for young riders, better than any equestrian website in the world. And there's always great everyday and promotional prices too, with an enormous selection from head to toe. Equestrian Collections have your young riders covered. So you can shop at the Young Riders department at equestriancollections.com or in the horse department. Be sure to check them out. They have much more than young riders. They have something for everybody there at equestriancollections.com. Equestrian Collections is a participating retailer of the Horse World Gives Back campaign. And my next guest, Jane Goldsmith, is someone I've known for many years. She's been a former chief examiner for the British Horse Society. She competed successfully herself in show jumping, eventing and dressage and has trained competitors in all of those Olympic disciplines. Also used to coach Lee Pearson, but now spends much of her time officiating at para dressage competitions, so no one better qualified to tell us what it involves to become a judge in para dressage, and a little bit more about the sport, the growth of it in the UK and worldwide. So let's hear from Jane. Well, Jane, welcome to the Dressage Radio Show, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Well, you join us from England. Tell us exactly where you are. A lot of people, of course, know you well over that side of the pond, but give us a sense of where you are in the world.
I live in the middle of England, not far from Stratford-on-Avon, that almost everyone in the world has heard of,
Yes.
with very good access to roads and airports, which is really essential for the way of life that I've developed over the last, 20 years or so anyhow, in para, and a long time before that in eventing. So, an ideal location.
It is a perfect spot there, Jane, and we should explain that you and I go back a very long way when we worked together in training and education, back a long time ago now, isn't it?
That's right, and in fact I've been doing quite a lot of pruning in my office, and I come across all sorts of things that certainly you and I were involved in together, developing NVQs and setting up training systems in areas of the horse world that haven't got any training systems, particularly in racing, who of course now have a very strong education system.
Yes, that's really heartening to see the growth of that aspect, as you mentioned, the national vocational qualifications there, and the growth of training and education in the horse world. And you have been involved a very long time, longer than we're going to count, Jane, in wearing many hats in the sports and mainly in the Olympic disciplines. But it would be remiss of me to go any further without congratulating you on winning the British Horse Society Queen's Award for Equestrianism.
Well, that's very kind of you. It was quite overwhelming. I was not at all expecting it. I knew I'd been nominated, but I never really thought that I would actually receive the award. And both John, my husband, and I had a wonderful day out at Hickstead where the award was presented. And it's a great honour. We're only the sixth person so far to receive this award. So, absolutely brilliant.
Well, duly merited, and as I said, you've done so many things, not least of all as an examiner for the British Horse Society and a judge. And we want to talk, of course, this week about your role as a para judge. But just give us a sense, to put this in context, Jane, of where you came from outside of the para world and developed the expertise that you now have and specialising in para dressage.
Well, I was an international event judge, and I remarried and decided that I would give up doing international event judging because it meant being away from home a lot, and a lot more than I really wanted to be. And my husband met somebody at a dinner in London, and she said to him, would Jane be interested in joining the paras? Obviously not as a rider. And he said, well, she might be. And then at the same time, John Quill Salt, who will be well known to anybody in para because she was really the founder of international para dressage, also asked me if I would go and do some teaching at a group that she had founded at Moulton Moral. And I said, I don't know about that. I don't know anything about disability. I'm not sure that I could do it. But to cut a long story short, like almost everybody I've ever met who has put their toe into paras, once you put your toe in, you are absolutely hooked. And the fascination of teaching, in particular, people with a disability, and trying to have identical outcomes to those who have no disability is quite fascinating. Really makes you think about what you say, think about how your pupils going to react. It was just opened a whole new horizon for me, and still, to this day, I haven't lost that fascination on the coaching side.
What is, of course, extraordinary, and I think impresses anyone who watches paradressage, Jane, is the level of commitment and the ability within the disabilities of young riders.
Absolutely. And their willingness to help each other across the world. I mean, of course, each country wants to do as well as possible. But even so, when there's a crisis, they will all help each other. And Lee would probably tell you himself about his experience in Athens with the French girl whose horse died entering the arena. And one of the most moving things I've ever seen was Lee giving his bouquet of flowers to this girl. And that sort of thing, I just don't really think you get that in able-bodied sport.
It's extraordinary sportsmanship, isn't it, on a level that, as you say, in able-bodied sports perhaps we don't see, because they come from a different place in their lives, perhaps. Exactly.
And these guys, they've had to strive to get where they are. There is no shortcut for them. They could, even if someone buys them a really smart horse, this smart horse has got to learn to cope with their disability, and they've got to adapt to the smart horse's way of going and how it's been trained in the past. So, I mean, yes, their dedication and commitment is quite startling.
Well, it's extraordinary, the growth of paradressage in the UK, Jane. I want to talk a little bit about that because obviously England is hosting the Olympic Games next year and the Paralympics, and I'm sure you're going to be involved with that at some level. But tell us a little bit about, having been involved with able-bodied sports for so long and coming into paradressage, you have the ideal perspective of why this particular sports discipline has grown at the rate it has, and you have the success of the rate that you do in England. I mean, notwithstanding, of course, that England is a very successful equestrian nation, but this is different in itself, isn't it?
Yes, and I think we were lucky in several ways. Firstly, of course, we were able to model ourselves on British dressage, and in particular what it had done for young riders. And I was very lucky because I'd been director of young riders for British dressage before I moved into the para role. So I knew quite a lot about how things had been set up and what sort of things we could mirror image. Then, secondly, that we had a clean sheet of paper. And, that's a wonderful position to be in. When I started out, there were perhaps 6 or 8 riders, and that was it. But there was no plan as such. Obviously, there was a plan to be able to try to find riders that you could send to Atlanta, for example. But there wasn't a structure. So that was marvelous. We had this great blank sheet of paper on which we could build our structure. And then the best thing of all, of course, was having lottery funding, which comes through UK Sport. So that now we have a system where most disabled riders start out in RDA, as in most countries in the world. And they can then move from that into, we have a charity that supports riders starting out in sport.
We should point out that's the Riding for the Disabled Association.
Yeah, that's right. And then this charity is called the Paradressage Training Trust. And what they do is they subsidize training in the regions, which might be with your own horse, it might be with a horse you've borrowed or hired for the occasion. And in addition, they provide schoolmaster horses for riders starting out in sport so that they can get noticed by the British Equestrian Federation, the BEF, and then possibly get onto one of the strands. Because there are 4 strands in the BEF. There's a foundation squad, then there's a start, potential, and then a performance squad. And all those squads are, to some extent, supported by the lottery. We have a full-time performance director for para and for the para performance group, and we have another director who looks after the development group, which includes start and potential. We have coaches that are dedicated to it, and they are again supported by UK Sport. I mean, our chief coach, Michel Assouline, this is not his only job. He has a big training centre. He and his wife both compete at Grand Prix internationally, as well as training our squad. And it's been that steady growth, and every time we've seen a gap, we've tried to fill in the gap so that we now have 200 registered para riders who are actually riding in para sport.
That's an incredible pool of talent there.
Yeah.
Obviously, you must feel optimistic about the Paralympics in London next year.
Well, we do, but of course we haven't been beaten yet. We've got to be beaten sometime. we just hope that it's not London.
Not in your own backyard.
No, that's right. That's right. If we get beaten at the end of this month for the Europeans in Belgium, we'll live with that, because Lee is not riding because of his injury. But we certainly don't want to be beaten in London.
Well, what is extraordinary, of course, is not just the growth of paradressage, but the growth of dressage in the UK. And for an expat looking at that sport and how it has grown exponentially over the last 10, 15, 20 years, what do you attribute that to, Jane? I mean, obviously there's a lot of moving parts, and you said you have benefited in paradressage from learning from what they've done in able-bodied dressage.
I think that probably the most important thing has been the growth of what we call BIRDS, the British Young Rider Dressage Scheme, which encompasses the children riding in dressage who might only be 7 or 8 years old, all the way up to 21. And they, again, have benefited from the lottery funding because they have the strands that lead them through exactly the same pathway that I've just described for paras. And why there are now more people prepared to invest in dressage is a much harder question to answer. I think there's been a lot more journalism and growth in the big national championships to get people to go and watch, and therefore to get better sponsorship. There's been much more interest in breeding. I just read today that we've just won the World Young Horse 5-year-old championship with a horse ridden by Michael Eilberg. Well, you would never have thought of us actually having that sort of...
beating the Germans and the Dutch.
Exactly, yeah.
It's very, very exciting, and it's extraordinary, isn't it, how it has grown. And as you say, why people invest in it is another matter, because if you're not from the horse world and you look at dressage, obviously as a spectator sport, it's not as spectacular, it's not as exciting as anything that involves jumping. But it seems, I think, through freestyle to music has done a lot for it too. And you, of course, use freestyle in the paradressage as well. Do you see this growth rate continuing, Jane, within paradressage?
I suppose eventually we must have recruited almost everyone who's there to recruit. So I guess the growth rate will slow down a little bit. But I expect that if we can keep our membership at around the 200 mark, that should enable the sport to continue to grow in the depth in terms of the quality, because we should get more quality riders coming in right at the bottom. So they're better educated now coming from RDA than they used to be in the beginning. So I think that probably, as I say, the growth will slow down a little, but I think that if we can keep around the numbers we have now, that would be okay.
And you, of course, have this amazing structure now, which is the foundation for your success. I want to ask you about judging, though, Jane. If you're coming from the able-bodied world and the opportunities are there to judge in para, you obviously have to understand the grades, the levels, and the expectations. What sort of challenge does that present to a judge?
I think the biggest challenge to somebody, and now you have to be judging at Prix St. George level to get in as a judge. So you're starting off with educated judges who are used to judging horses which are working in an advanced frame, they're working uphill, they're working in collection. Well, that's all fine for grade 4, which is the grade for the least disabled. It's not too bad for grade 3. But when you get down to the bottom end of the scale, and in 1A, the test is entirely in walk, most judges would never, ever have judged a whole test in walk. And getting that right is really difficult because, as Carlos Lopez says, well, of course, Jane, the Grade 1A Championship is the Grand Prix of 1A. And he's right, in a way. It's just that you can't expect somebody with very little physical strength to ride a horse uphill into a connection. So what we are more looking at is the harmony between the horse and rider is absolutely the very top thing. Then we're looking at the self-carriage, the horse's willingness to carry itself with as little help from the rider as possible. And, of course, the quality of the walk is paramount in top competition. And even in the lower competition, you can't possibly have a faulty walk. It must at least be true and correct, even if it's not a 9 or a 10 walk. But I know, even speaking for myself, the courage to give a 9 or a 10 in walk and with the halt, they're the other two things you have, is hard. And then when you come on to 1B and you have some trotting, but again, one's expectation is not that the horse necessarily is going to be spectacularly uphill and engaged. We're still looking for the harmony. If you get the odd rider like Lee, who is able to do that, then of course they are going to be singled out from the rest, because if they can keep the harmony and the expression, then they're firing away. There's also a very good rider in 1B from Austria, who in Lee's absence has been capitalizing like mad and is head at the moment of the FEI rankings. And his name is Peppo Pook. And remember this name because I think he will give Lee a really nice challenge over the next few years. And he has some lovely horses. He's an ex-event rider, so he knows what it's like to ride. And he has the ability to ride his horses in this rather special way.
How does one become a para judge then? Obviously, you have to, as you said, of been judging at Prix St. George level at least.
Yeah.
You just apply to that association in your country, Jane?
That's right. And needless to say, we have a very strong structure. We're very strict with our judges. If they want to come in and they're on the right list, we insist that they do some work with the RDA tests as well as the para tests. so they do get a really good understanding about disability. Because although you're not going to judge the disability in any way, you do need to recognize the difficulties that are going to be encountered if you've only got one leg or one arm or you can't see, all these things. So they progress nationally, and then when they have judged sufficiently nationally, they can go to British Dressage and ask if they can apply to go as an FEI candidate judge, where they then go through exactly the same procedure as able-bodied judges. They have to go on a course. They have to have judged a certain number of competitions and shadow judged and all this sort of thing in order to gradually progress up the stars. So we have exactly the same starring structure as able-bodied judges have.
And you're, of course, a 5-star judge, aren't you?
That's right, yeah.
So as good as it gets.
Well, I suppose that's right.
Well, Jane, you're clearly going to be a force to be reckoned with the paradressage, the British team over there for the London Olympics, and also for the able-bodied team. Who would have thought, Jane, that when you and I don't remember how long ago when we were working together, and we would look at dressage and imagine that we were in this position now with British dressage and paradressage?
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't when there were only sort of 3 or 4 horses in the Grand Prix.
Yes.
I mean, that was it in the country.
Yes.
It's just phenomenal.
It certainly is. You must be very excited about hosting the Olympics and the Paralympics.
Oh, yes. And I was lucky enough to go to the test event. And I think that Greenwich is going to be a fantastic site, truly memorable. And we'll hope and pray that we have some reasonable weather, that it's not too British on the weather front.
Well, we hope so for everyone's benefit, and we want to wish you the best of luck with your team, but not too much luck, because, you know, we do have a good team over here as well.
Exactly.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for spending time with us this week. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and good luck next year.
Thank you very much indeed.
And if you are interested in getting involved in paradressage, then we suggest you go to the website for your governing body in your country. And if you're in England, that would be britishdrassage.co.uk, where they have a page on getting started in para-equestrian. Well, my next guest is Courtney King-Dye, who's well known to many listeners here on the Dressage Radio Show. And not least of all, she came on, actually, we had a special show for her a few weeks ago now. And she told us how she was doing in the road to recovery. Well, I thought it was time to catch up with her again, because I recently heard that she was getting herself involved in paradressage to become a competitor. And if you know Courtney, you'll know she's not short of determination. So we'll hear about that in just a moment, how she's getting started. But before we do that, I want to remind you about our sponsors here on the Dressage Radio Show, horseshow.com, because you can now compete online, just like you were at a regular horse show at horseshow.com. You can get judged by the top riders and get the judges' comments. Just upload your home video and enter a class online at horseshow.com. It's a simple and economic way for you to compete with your horse from home. It's also a great way to prepare for your next show or to track your progress during the off-season. Horseshow.com features real horse shows for multiple breeds and disciplines, and they're judged by nationally accredited judges. So don't wait. Upload and enter to win anytime at horseshow.com. Well, as I said, my next guest, she may be an Olympian, but she still has new ambitions. And Courtney Dye now is setting her new targets on becoming a paradressage competitor. So I was able to catch up with Courtney the other day. She leads a very busy schedule, but she had time to tell us a little bit now about where she's heading with this new goal that she has to become a competitor in this sport of paradressage. Well, hi, Courtney. Welcome back to the show. You're becoming a regular here on the Dressage Radio Show.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I was wondering about your riding, Courtney, because a little bird told me that you've got some new ambitions that you're going to tell us about this week.
Yeah, I decided that I wanted to do para dressage because before I wanted to compete with the best in the world like I did before, but then I realized that's gonna be years. So I think para dressage is great because it allows you to show the best you can be right now. So I think I am really happy about doing para dressage because it gives me goals to work towards and schedule and things like that. And so I do para dressage, but I hope that is a stepping stone back into able-bodied dressage. So I think it's a fantastic, for people that are injured or hurt or disabled, I think it's a fantastic way to show the best you can be right now.
Well, no one will be surprised, Courtney, that you have these ambitions. You know, you've just started riding. I know you're riding regularly now. And obviously you're continuing to improve both in your rehabilitation and your riding. Tell us exactly where you are. What is your comfort zone right now with your riding, Courtney? With walking? Is it trotting? How is it going right now?
Well, with para dressage, I'm really between levels because I can walk on my own and they have a walk-only test, but I'm too advanced for that. And I do trot with someone leading the horse, but I can't trot by myself yet. So, because my arm doesn't work, so I can't steer. So I'm really not good enough to do the Chasseur trot in it, but I'm allergic to advance for the walk test. So I'm in between levels. And my riding right now, I ride twice a week, and I'm so lucky to have a perfect horse who already boarded at my barn, and the owner very, very generously lets me ride her. And so I get to ride her twice a week, and she's perfect.
So tell us about the levels. You said you're in between levels, Courtney, because I think this would help people understand, how does someone get involved with para-dressage? They may have a different disability, all kinds of disabilities, and they may be wondering, well, maybe this is something for me, but how do I get started, and what are the levels that they should expect? You explained that you're between levels, Courtney.
Well, I would say just what I did is contact USEF, and they have information on para-dressage there, and they will send you physical therapist a paper of tests to do with you to give them an idea of how they grade you. The level depends on the grade. There are, I think, 4 grades, and I'm directly between the bottom 2 grades.
So once you start, then you said you're in between the bottom 2. Would you then just continue to work up the grades before you start competing? Or when would you actually start competing, Courtney, for your grade?
Well, the thing is, I was concerned about competing in para dressage because I thought maybe my intended recovery would be a problem. So they said there's no problem at all. Some people's disabilities are permanent, so they always stay the same grade. And if I continue to improve as expected, then I'll go up the grades. And what else did you ask? Sorry.
I was just interested then in terms of competing. Courtney.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Where you would go next, and when would you start competing for your grade?
Well, my goal is to be able to do the first grade was trotting by the end of Florida. That's my goal, but I am not positive it will happen, but it's good to have a goal.
Absolutely. Well, you've always set yourself goals, haven't you? And right now, I guess your focus is on your steering and the brakes. It's a bit like driving a car. You've got to have your steering and your brakes working, haven't you?
Well, yeah, but I'm good at brakes, and I'm okay at steering. What I'm not good at is the balance it takes to trot. So I am all out of balance and wobbly, and so I really have to build up my core strength to be stable. And my right arm has to get better because not only can I not feel the horse when I trot, my right arm is so unstable, it bounces around, it flops around, so it's terrible.
So it's a continuous challenge for you, but your determination is as strong as ever, isn't it? I mean, you're just determined to make your way with power and eventually become able-bodied as a rider and back to, the former life you had before the accident. Do you set yourself milestones? You mentioned that you had the one about trotting before the end of Florida. Tell us where that fits in your calendar, Courtney.
Well, I really don't have learned from this injury not to have a calendar. I can't set expectations because my body has to accommodate. So I'm really with riding. I just love riding, and so I set goals because I like to work towards something, but my time on the horse is just enjoyment of being with the horse.
And you're riding twice a week, you said. Do you expect that you will be riding more, or does it depend on your schedule? Because you do a lot of rehab and therapy and all kinds of things, arts and pottery. Yeah. You're busy, aren't you?
Yes, very busy. But I think in Florida I will get to ride more because the barn is close. Here is 45 minutes each way. So I have to have a working student come pick me up and take me back, which takes 3 hours out of their day. So it's of course I'm busy, but it takes much more time for her.
And so you'll be heading to Florida then later this year for the winter, will you, Courtney? So you'll be able to get closer to your horse.
Yeah. I think that I'll go down this year in November and come back in May.
Wonderful. Well, that's something to look forward to. And now you're doing some teaching as well, aren't you?
Yes, I teach 1 day a week. Thursday is my fun day. And so I just started teaching riders who I don't know. Because before I felt bad charging for when I wasn't sure that they'd understand my speaking. But I just started to teach some people that I don't know. So every week on Thursdays I go teach. And I teach all my horses, and it's fun to be a part of their life. And even though, of course, I would like to be riding, I get a lot of enjoyment out of teaching.
Well, good for you, Courtney. You're really making the best of everything. I want to wish you the best of luck with your goals and your ambitions with the para dressage, your inspiration to so many people, and not least of all people who may be considering doing some para dressage themselves. So good luck, and come back on the show again in a few months' time and tell us how it's going in Florida.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Well, if you're looking for inspiration, I hope you'll agree that you'll certainly find it on this week's show. Well, I do have one more thing for you in just a second, but before I get to that, I want to remind you about Charles Owen, one of our valued sponsors here on the Horse Radio Network's Dressage Radio Show, and that is that they also, apart from, of course, being well known for their helmets, they also make gloves. And one of those is the Ruckle Chester. It's a lightweight, close-fitting glove made from Vesta synthetic leather. It provides a sensitive feel on the reins coupled with an excellent grip. And the Ruckle New Ascot glove is another stylish synthetic leather glove that comes with rein reinforcements and an elasticated wristband, plus a hook and loop fastening tab for adjustability. The back of the glove is breathable, which prevents the buildup of sweat. It's practical and hard-wearing, making it ideal for everyday use. You can find out more about these gloves and all of the Charles Owen products by visiting their website at charlesowen.co.uk. And my final segment this week is a quote from a well-known Olympian, someone you know and love who's been on the Dressage Radio Show. Can you tell me who this is? I caught the horse bug spending summers on my uncle's ranch in Kansas. When I was 12, I managed to persuade my parents to buy me a pony called Flanagan, promising that I would pay for the upkeep of the pony myself. I found a place to keep him at the local county fairground, where there was also a trainer. He allowed me to work for my pony's board. When I was 14, I remember being horrified to find this trainer in my pony's stable with a whip in his hand, abusively trying to teach Flanagan to stand up on his hind legs. At that point, I went looking for a new stable, which is when I met my future husband. So if you know who I was quoting there, just drop me an email, chris@horseradionetwork.com, or post it on our Facebook fan page at Dressage Radio. And you can also leave your comments and questions there, of course. We always love to hear from you if you've got any ideas. If you have any suggestions for great partnerships too, we are always continuing that series here on the show. And I also do want to remind you about our young reporters. We've got young reporters now on all of my 3 shows. I'm really excited about that. So if you're under 20 years of age and you're anywhere in the world and have a competition you would like to report here on the show, then send me an email, chris@horseradionetwork.com. Don't forget to check out all our show notes at dressageradio.com. You can also go to our Hallway Feeds app if you have an iPhone and listen on the go, as I said earlier. And you also can check out our offers from Audible and Amazon straight from our website at dressageradio.com. And also visit us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Horse Radio or Chris E. Stafford. Don't forget the middle E. And don't be shy about contacting me. I always love to hear from you if you have any comments, questions or suggestions for the show. Chris@horseradionetwork.com. That's CHRIS at horseradionetwork.com. Well, that wraps it up for this week. I hope you've enjoyed our focus on paradressage. I want to thank my guests again, Lee Pearson, Jane Goldsmith and Courtney Dye. I will be back, of course, the same time, same place next week. So until then, thank you all for listening.